Hello, everyone, and welcome to the U.S. Civil War, a game by GMT Games, designed by Mark Simonich. This is kind of an oldie but a goodie. Don't let the rather uninspired counters and the rather GMT plain map kind of fool you. This is an amazing game, super easy to kind of pick up and get into. And what I like about Mark Simonich's games, if you ever played Stalingrad 42 or Salerno 43, any of those kind of games, it's kind of based on the same system, obviously adapted to the U.S. Civil War, but it really allows you to start getting on the rules, allow you to get into the game and really kind of sink your teeth into it and start making strategic decisions and feel like a general without actually having to fight not only the enemy but also a really dense and confusing rule set. So this kind of really gets you into the thick of things, really lets you start moving counters around, playing the Civil War out on your tabletop from the western border of Arkansas, Missouri, all the way out across the south to the Atlantic Ocean. It goes down to the Gulf, which is off camera. I'll take you to show you that when it becomes relevant. But it's a really amazing system, really fun to start moving counters around, and I really enjoy strategic level games or operational level games as opposed to tactical games. Like I love the Civil War, obviously, but once you get down into like the regiment level, it just becomes a lot of unit facing and opportunity fires and a lot to keep track of for one person. Whereas at the strategic level, you can really kind of sit back, think, have all the rules in your head, what's possible, because it basically, like, even supply in this game is relatively easy to kind of get a hold of because you have to follow your train lines and be close to rivers in order to be in supply. So it's very intuitive in that sense. And if you're familiar with the Civil War and the operations of the Civil War, everything that happened in real life is able to be replicated on the board somehow, usually pretty simply. So if you want to, over here on the kind of off camera a little bit, but is the eastern seaboard, if you want to do an amphibious assault on North Carolina, you can do it with Burnside or whomever you want. If you want to be McClellan and try to go up the peninsula, that can be easily replicated. And everything down to controlling the waterways. I'm using the basic rules for the naval game because the advanced game has a whole nother rule book that I didn't feel like getting into. But the basic game still has river control and river crossings, and makes it really interesting to have to keep control of it. You can have, like, here's Dover, which is between the Cumberland and the Tennessee River, and so the Confederates obviously could put Fort Donelson here and control the relevant rivers. And so yeah, it's a lot to kind of think about strategically without having to think about rules, which I love. And so this is the 1861 scenario setup. Pretty early in the war, so there's only going to be, this game works by action cycle, so you roll a dice to determine a dice differential, which is how many actions you get per action cycle. In 1861, there's only 3 action cycles, and the rest of the war there's 4. And so you go back and forth using your actions each action cycle. It'll make more sense as we get into it and start playing, but so in the beginning, it's kind of slow. Kentucky is neutral, obviously, in the first year of the war, and they remain neutral unless and until one of the sides enters it with their SPs, which is a strength point or an army, basically, and violates their neutrality. And if they do so, they default to joining the other side that didn't attack them. And if no side attacks them by turn 4, they just automatically join the Union. So usually what happens in this game is turn 3, the Confederates will invade Kentucky and take Bowling Green and Columbus, which give them more basically recruitment points, simulating that the Kentuckians are rallying to the flag, which, maybe didn't quite happen as much as the Confederates hoped, but in this game it's simulated by giving them, I think, like an extra reinforcement point. So in the early stages of the war, I should say, and the entire game is broken up into theaters, so you can kind of see the red line, dotted line here, but it's broken up into the Eastern Theater, the Western Theater, and then the Trans-Mississippi, just like it was historically. And so in the beginning, 1861, not much happens in the Western Theater, but obviously we'll have Bull Run in the east and Wilson's Creek out here in Springfield, which you can kind of see way out here off screen, between Price and Nathaniel Lyon, hopefully, if we get enough action points, etc. But yeah, so I'm going to be hewing close to the historical movements of everybody, but if I see something interesting, I'm just going to go for it. So without further ado, hopefully that was a sufficient introduction. We're going to go ahead and start rolling for the dice differential and see who goes first in 1861. And the last bit of setup note I should add before we start rolling, we rolled to see where the first Confederate arsenal goes, and it's going in Virginia. So I put it in Richmond because I figured that's a pretty safe place for it to be. So the first initiative roll, I should say blue obviously is Union, gray is Confederates. So this is a dice differential of 1 with the Union gaining initiative. So you probably can't see it, but with a dice differential of 1, each side gets 1 action point per theater. So they get 1 action point to spend in the Trans-Mississippi, 1 to spend in the West, and 1 to spend in the East. So with the Union going first and using all 3 of their action points. So it's going to be pretty easy, I think. We are going to just move. I think first we're going to attack with McClellan here in the East. So he's going to attack with his 2 SPs, the Confederate garrison or the Confederate force that's here in Philippi. Going to be doing our Philippi races, I think. So I'll get that all set up and bring you back when we're ready to roll. All right, real quick, just here's how combat works. So McClellan, he has 2 SP, so he's going to be in the 2 column. The Confederates have 1 SP, so they'll be rolling in the 1 column. They get 1d6. So McClellan, he has an attack rating or attack command rating of 1, a defense command rating of 1, and a movement factor of 1. That's what those 3 numbers are on the general counters. So he gets a +1 on this attack because this is back when he was still a go-getter, as it were, before he got transferred over to the command of the Army of the Potomac. So he gets a +1 on this die roll. The Confederates are not entrenched or anything. The forest hexes don't give any kind of defense bonus. And the river runs through the center of the hex, so it doesn't affect attacks at all or anything. So we're going to roll a red die for the Confederates and a blue die for McClellan. So McClellan rolled a 5 plus his 1 for a 6. Confederates only rolled a 2. So if we look at the results table, in the 2 column for McClellan, a 5 plus 1 is a 6. So he inflicts 1 SP loss on the Confederates, whereas the Confederates with their 2 in the 1 column only get a diamond. The diamond and the asterisks are for used to break ties, with asterisks beating diamonds, diamonds beating nothing. So McClellan inflicts 1 step loss or 1 SP loss on the Confederates, destroying the Confederate unit around Philippi, and then he advances into Philippi, and if I can grab him, there he goes. And now he used 1 SP for that, and now he's going to spend 2 more SPs to plop a control marker down on Philippi. And now the only thing the Union will have to do is capture Charleston for West Virginia to revert back to the Union control. So the Union still has a action to spend in the west, and I think they're just going to move this SP down from Springfield to Cairo because they're using a train track basically. They can move 12 hexes on the train track. Otherwise, they'd be maxed out at 3 hexes for a generalless unit. And then for the Trans-Mississippi action, we're going to move Lion. He has 5 movement factors. So he's just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. So he's 2 hexes away from Springfield. And I do eventually want to recapture this town of Warsaw on the Osage and Lexington up here on the Missouri, but it's not. Neither of them are objective hexes, whereas Springfield, we can see by the big black dot, is a objective hex. So we want to get there before Price can get there. And speaking of which, it is now the Confederates' turn in this action cycle, and they get 1 action in each theater. And I go back and forth on this of whether Price has 1 SP. He can move now and get into Springfield. And kind of get there before Lion, or he can wait for his 1 SP reinforcement from Fayetteville. I think discretion maybe is the better part of valor in this case, and we're going to move the 1 SP from Fayetteville to Price, who now has 2 SPs under his command. And then we're going to hope that the Confederates get the initiative first in the next action cycle so we can move Price and get into Springfield before Lion does. So that's our action used in the Trans-Mississippi. In the Western Theater, we're going to move Polk, who has 1 SP under his command here in Memphis. And Leonidas Polk is going to use the train to get up here to Union City and join this 2 SP unit. So he'll have 3 SP under his command, ready to move into Columbus, Kentucky when Kentucky decides to join the Union. And now here in the East, we are going to just activate this Confederate unit in Stanton, and we're going to put a entrenchment marker on him because now I have a feeling that McClellan is going to be coming through the Alleghenies to attack Stanton. So Stanton is now protected. The backside of the Virginia line is protected, and that is going to be the 3 actions for the Confederates in this first action cycle. So now it's time to roll some dice again. And I should say, after movement and combat, you check to see if everybody's in supply. I can tell you this early in the game, there's really no supply issues for anybody. So with that, here's another die roll. And another 1 differential die roll. Again, the Union getting the initiative. So 1 action point for each theater, with the Union moving first. I think we're going to move these 2 SPs from Baltimore and give them to McDowell here in Alexandria. So he now has 6 SPs against Beauregard's 4. So that's looking good for first battle of Manassas, maybe the next activation, or the next action cycle, I should say. So that's it for the East for the Union. Now we go West. There isn't much that the Union can do out west here, because obviously we're not going to violate Kentucky's neutrality. So we're going to skip for now, unless I can think of anything for the Western Theater, and go to where the action's at over here in the Trans-Mississippi. So Lion has 2 options now. He can try to wait for this 1 SP from Rolla to join him, or he can just go capture Springfield now. He has 5 movement points, and he get here in 2, which means he can then spend 2 movement points to entrench, and I think that's what he's going to do. So he's going to move into Springfield, and fortify, or entrench, I should say, he can't remove the Confederate control marker because he only has 1 SP. So he has to wait for the end phase to capture that. But he's now entrenched in Springfield. Again, he only has 1 SP, but it's kind of better than nothing. And for the Western Theater, we're just going to move this 1 SP from Columbus along this rail line to Cincinnati and give it 2 SPs. Okay, now the Confederates get their 1 action in each theater. And I think Price is going to attack Lyon here in Springfield. So he's going to move his 2 SPs, 1, 2, 3, and attack. Lyon is going to take it with his 1 SP. He has a 1 defense, he'd rather be attacking. But it'll be better than a 0, obviously. So the Confederates get a +1 attacking for the for Price's attack rating, and that's it. The defenders, the Union, will get the +1 from Lyon, and then a +2 for being entrenched, so +3. So it's going to be tough, but the Confederates are going to be in the 2 column, the Union's going to be in the 1 column, so we'll see. That's not what the Confederates wanted to see at all. So we have a 7 for the Union in the 1 column, which is a 1 SP loss, and a 2 in the 2 column is just a diamond, so it's a 0 SP losses inflicted. So Price loses an SP and gains a demoralized marker, which basically means he gets a -2 DRM if he's going to attack again. The only way he can pull that is either waiting for the end of the turn or else using an action while being in supply to pull that off in the next action cycle. So Lyon successfully holds on to Springfield without suffering an SP loss. I should say each SP, I think, represents about 5,000 men. So kind of that as an idea for losses and strength of stacks. So Price remains here. He just retreats back to the hex he attacked from. So he remains here for this action cycle. In the Western Theater, I should say, the Confederates do have a special, so these are special action cards, and you can use them for various things, adding DRMs to stuff, but the main thing that you can do with them is build a fort or upgrade a fort. And so they're going to use that, I think, they're going to use that card to build a fort, and we're going to reinforce Nashville, I think, with a fort. Or no, you know what, we'll make Fort Donelson. So forts block control on navigable rivers. So Union control flows down the Cumberland and the Tennessee and then stops at the fort. So this part of the Tennessee and this part of the Tennessee is Confederate controlled, and the Union can't do an amphibious assault down the river past the fort, which is how it was historically, which is pretty cool. So they can't go from Cairo, do an amphibious assault on Nashville now. They have to come down overland. So that's Fort Donelson created with the special action card for the West. Now that's not an action, that's just kind of in addition to the action. So we'll also activate somebody in the West. I think what we're going to do is come down to the Gulf and entrench some of the militia down here. So here's your first look probably at the Gulf. Oops. We have the way it works is these hexes, these kind of star-shaped hexes, represent coastal forts. So this, for example, is Fort Morgan, which is covering the entrance to Mobile Bay. And even though it doesn't have a counter on it, it's garrisoned and intact, and the Union will have to take the coastal forts. Down here we have Fort St. Philip and Fort Jackson, for example, on the Mississippi. So they'll have to take the forts before they can proceed past them, because the coastal forts exert a control over the hex, the coastal hex behind them, basically. And before the Union can do an amphibious assault on Mobile, for example, they have to first do a successful amphibious assault on the protecting coastal fort. However, there's ways around it. Obviously, the Union could go into Pascagoula or Biloxi and attack Mobile from the landward side. To do that, they would have to take control of Ship Island. So, I don't know. Who do we want? So, like I said, we can use the militia to build entrenchments. I think for now, we're just going to build an entrenchment on this one SP unit that's here in Pensacola. Since the Union already controlled Fort Pickens at the start of the war, it would make a good base of assault to capture this port. Now, the Pensacola port, the blockade runners are cut off because the Union controlled the coastal fort, however. But we don't want them getting into the victory or the resource point hex of Pensacola. So we'll just entrench that one SP unit there. And now we head over to the Eastern Theater. Over here in the East, not much is happening. Obviously, as the Confederates, we aren't going to really do any attacking. So I think all we're going to do, as boring as it is entrench the Virginia militia here in Strasburg, so that Patterson can't just march his way willy-nilly down the valley, or up the valley, I should say. So that's the second action cycle complete, and everybody's in supply. So now we just do our die roll for the dice differential in action cycle 3. Again, dice differential of 1, this time with the Confederates going first. So 1 action in each theater. The Confederate action in the East, I think we're just going to entrench the North Carolina militia here in Roanoke Island. Eventually, probably Burnside is going to capture Hatteras Inlet. I think I just noticed that I had an SP lying here in Beaufort for no good reason. So if you saw that on when I had the camera up high in the beginning, that wasn't supposed to be here. So I fixed that. And so now we have the North Carolina militia in Roanoke Island entrenched, and we head out west. In the Western Theater, the Confederates don't really have much to do. We might as well entrench Polk, because why not? I mean, the Union might violate Kentucky's neutrality. Who knows? They won't. Spoiler. And over here in the Trans-Mississippi, Price is just going to retreat to Fayetteville with his action. So that's the Confederate threat to Missouri taken care of. And now we go to the Union action cycle 3, 1 action in each theater. And I think what we're going to do over here in the Trans-Mississippi is move this SP from Rolla 1, 2, 3 towards Springfield, try to reinforce Lyon next turn. In the west, no, I don't think we're going to be doing anything in the west. Not going to be moving anybody, not invading Kentucky. So we'll skip the Union activation in the west and head to the east, where it's going to be the Battle of Manassas. Okay, here we are in the east for the final action of the final action cycle in the first summer turn of 1861. and we're going to be doing the First Battle of Manassas. So there's a special scenario rule for the first turn of the game in 1861 that allows Joseph E. Johnston to do a 2-hex rail intercept movement from basically Front Royal to Manassas to simulate his historic use of the railroad to get to Manassas in time to help Beauregard. So he is going to do an interception attempt. And to do that, we go to the interception table. So we add for the DRM, we add the Commanding General's defense rating. Johnston is a 2 defense rating. And we have a picket line because the interception attempt is into a hex containing a friendly combat unit. So that's a +4 DRM, and as you'll see, we need to roll a 9 or higher for successful intercept. We roll a 7, and then the +4 is an 11, plenty for the intercept. So Johnston joins Beauregard, takes over command as he did historically, much to Beauregard's chagrin, and now McDowell is coming to clashing with the Confederates. Let's see what we have here. So Johnston brought 2 SPs to Beauregard's 4, and McDowell has 4 SPs, or 6 SPs total, but he has a 0 attack rating. Poor guy. Compared to Johnston's 2, plus the 2 for the defense. The Union only have a naval special action card, which means they can't play it to get the +2 DRM. We see that the attackers can get a special action card battle DRM if they discard a card for the theater that the battle is being fought in. So both sides are rolling in the 6 column. Even though we have 2 generals here for the Confederates, because they're rolling in the 6 column, they only get to use 1 leader's rating. So we're only using Johnston's. So like usual, we'll have a red die for the Confederates, blue die for the Union. Oops. Oh, this might be close. So the Confederates get the +2/+2 for a +4, so they get an 8 compared to McDowell's 6. So we go on the combat results table. For the Union, for the 6 is a 1 star, and when you see the 8 for the Confederates is a 2 star, or 2 asterisk. So because McDowell loses 2 SPs, he loses the combat. He retreats to the hex that he attacked from, so he stays or retreats to Alexandria, and he gets it left the hex technically, or at least that's how I've been playing. Technically, this stack moved into Manassas Junction, which made its entrenchments go away. It gets a demoralized marker, again, historically accurate, and it inflicted a 1 step loss on the Confederate stack, who now control the field at Manassas, just like that. And that's the Union action phase complete. And that is turn 1 complete if I'm reading my action cycle bar correctly. So that finishes turn 1 with a bang. I'll zoom out so that we can review the game state at the end of turn 1 and give you a preview for turn 2. Okay, here we are at the end of turn 1. Now there is some stuff to do first. At the end of, so we just did our action cycle, now we do the end phase. So the control segment, are you going to be able to see? Springfield is now Union controlled. West Virginia is now still, Confederate control because Union have not captured Charleston or put a control marker on it. If we had more actions, we probably would have attacked with this 1 SP down to the militia. As it is, it'll have to wait until next turn. The demoralized markers come off automatically for McDowell. And then over here, which you can't see, but in Fayetteville, Price's demoralized marker is also being removed. Up here we have this Confederate control marker, which was on Cumberland, Maryland. This gets removed because it can't trace a line of communications of 4 hexes to a Confederate SP. So there's the Virginia militia is 0 SP, so that doesn't count for that purposes. And since Johnston moved out of Front Royal, he can't keep that Confederate control marker there. Now we check for automatic victory, and nobody has a victory yet. The victory points have not changed. The Confederates would have gained 3 BPs if they held on to Springfield, but they don't. So everything is normal there. The Union didn't capture Charleston, which they really need to do to get that SP, or that BP away from the Confederates. And yeah, so that's the end of the turn complete, if I'm not forgetting anything, and the first turn of the game complete. So as a preview for turn 2, McDowell is going to get relieved, and McClellan, because he did so well at the Battle of Philippi, he is going to get flipped, and you'll see his new counter has a 0 attack, has 2 defense, and his 3 movement with the red border means he's a cautious general. So if he's going to move within the zone of influence, or the zone of control, in this game is called zone of influence, if he moves into the zone of influence of an enemy unit, he basically has to spend 2 action points to do that, or else the Union have to spend a special action card. So it really simulates him just planting his butt on the Potomac and not really moving anywhere. Out west, I can tell you, Lyon was basically, he was killed at the Battle of Wilson's Creek, as we're going to call it, and he gets replaced by, who does he get replaced by? Curtis. And Burnside's going to come in Baltimore probably, and organize his amphibious expedition down the coast to Hatteras Inlet. And yeah, that's what we have to look forward to for turn 2. Hope you join me then, and until then, see you on the next battlefield.